Welcome, everyone. Week 4, 2025 season of the Dolphins Make Me Cry podcast. Honored to be your host, Steve Giordano, where we will dissect everything that is the 0-3 Miami Dolphins. It's painful. And everything that is going to be the 0-3 Dolphins versus the 0-3 Jets on Monday Night Football. Man, I bet you ESPN's real glad that they put 2 games on. And I'm going to give you the bright spot of this game. And that is that it starts at 7:15, so that means I'll be home sooner than normal. And I'll give Stephen Ross credit. He's done a good job at the stadium of being able to have good egress and regress to get me home in 45 minutes. So thank you for that. Other than that, it's a complete cluster to be a Miami Dolphin fan. But we're going to break it all down here. We're going to back it up to the Dolphins' Week 3 loss in Buffalo. And I guess if you want to say, if you're the moral victory guy, which I am not, you can say that they did not get destroyed, and you can say that they had a pretty solid showing. But at the end of the day, good teams win and bad teams lose. And bad teams find ways to lose, as the Dolphins did on Thursday Night Football in Buffalo. You know, they came out, scored the first drive, good special teams play, probably one of the best coached games of Mike McDaniel. It's funny how that'll happen when you're basically have your feet to the fire to be fired. Amazing how all of a sudden you magically come out and run the ball. Interesting. But comes out, runs Ollie Gordon fairly consistently. And we were all screaming as Dolphin fans against the Patriots, you know, where is this guy? He had 1 rush for 8 yards. Big back who can certainly, you know, possibly do some things and be that nice 1-2 punch with Devon A-Chain, who is a different type of back, smaller back, more speed. And, you know, it's kind of what I expected in the Bills also not having a great run defense and also kind of giving the Dolphins the run. You come out, you take a 7-0 lead. And they were in the game, you know, going into halftime. They were in the game. You know, things were, you know, looking good. And the worry, again, was the defense. Can they get a stop? And now you're talking, we have a defense that in 3 straight games has given up over 30 points. And lo and behold, the team you're playing Monday night has done the same thing. And the Dolphins actually got 3 straight stops in the second half. But then it turned into the typical mistake fest that is Miami Dolphin football. Zach Sealer on a great stop that they had. I think it was the 3rd stop, actually. You know, roughing the punter, gives the Bills a first down. Bills score, go up 28-21. And, you know, look, Zach Sealer is a very good player, and we're going to talk a little bit further about him because I want to get into contracts here a little bit. He's a good player. Should he be on special teams? Maybe not. He does play special teams on the regular for the most part. You know, he's trying to make a play. But when you just look at this team and you look at the intelligence of the team, and I'm not trying to say Zach Sealer isn't intelligent because I think he probably is one of the more intelligent. He blows up the center. He's running hard. He's playing hard. But in a coaching moment, and I'm assuming the coaching didn't say this, maybe it did, in fairness, to just let's rush the punter, make him uncomfortable, but do nothing to hit him. And what happens? Blows up the center, bang, right into the punter, first down Bills. And when you're playing a team that is superior to you in talent, and you have to play mistake-free football to have a shot at the end to probably either tie or potentially win a game by, let's say, a field goal, you cannot make that mistake. And this is Zach Sealer, the guy that you just paid. And again, one play does not lose a game, but it certainly doesn't win one like that either. Then you turn into Tua Tagovailoa, who for now the 2nd straight week having a chance now to tie the game at 28, looks down his receiver all day long and basically throws it right into the chest of a Bills linebacker for an interception to essentially end the game. Bills kick a field goal, lose by 10, 31-21. And it's that big moment that, yeah, Tua's had some big moment wins. You know, look, I was at the game in Baltimore 2 years ago. You know, San Diego, I was at that game, or LA, whatever it is, Chargers. Dallas. He's had his moments, you know, but he hasn't had enough moments, and he hasn't had enough moments against top-tier playoff contenders. And then that gets you into his contract, which I also want to talk about. We're going to have a contract portion of the podcast tonight, even though we're in week 4. So back to this game. When you analyze this game where they're running the ball fairly consistently and they're throwing to open receivers, but it's a little deceiving because they got Tyreek and Waddle involved, but it was all just very short underneath. And it seemed like they both had 1 million catches, but in reality, they had their fair share. I think they each had 7 or 9, something like that. But they had like 36 and 39 yards. It was all short. Look, it kept them in the game. And look, the Bills definitely played somewhat down to them and definitely didn't have to, you know, unleash the beast of Josh Allen. They kind of let him manage the game, and very similar to the game that the Bills won down here to a concussion game last year. But, you know, the issue of that is they're giving you some stuff and you're not taking advantage of it. And it's actually scary because the Bills, look, they're a very good team, no doubt about it. And Allen is incredible, and he owns the Dolphins. He doesn't have to do much at the end of the day, and they're still scoring 30 points in these games. You know, you had it, you know, last year down here in Buffalo last year, this game, and it's just kind of what they do. So you have those 2 critical mistakes. And it's crazy because if let's say you walked out of there with a victory at 1-2, your season outlook looks completely different. If you would have somehow found a way to beat the Patriots and even lose this game, completely different outlook. If you won both, completely different outlook. But instead, we are where we are at 0-3. And since 1990, I believe 4 teams have made the playoffs starting 0-3. Very unlikely, of like 165 or some crazy number. So now that's the hole that you have dug yourself. And now you're staring in the mirror at basically the same team. The only difference is they at least have an excuse that they have a rookie first-year head coach and an unstable quarterback situation where they had Tyrod Taylor playing. Justin Fields will play in the Monday night game, coming off a concussion. You know, their defense has been porous. They have no turnovers, like you have no turnovers. And let's actually talk a little bit about the defense, because I've been on record as saying I think Anthony Weaver is a good coach, and I still believe he is a good coach. But this defense is dreadful, and it's actually dreadful for a couple of key reasons. No turnovers. They do not force turnovers. They didn't last year. They were bottom of the league of turnover, you know, of creating takeaways. The front 7 that everybody thought was going to be so good, myself included, I kind of bought into it a little bit, has been atrocious. And the bottom line is you will not win in this league if you cannot stop the run and if you cannot run it yourself. Period. End of story. The game is won and lost up front. And anybody who wants to tell you different doesn't actually know football. They know fantasy and watching Patrick Mahomes throw it for 1 million times. But they don't actually pay attention to the reason that Mahomes can do it. Some is him, most is his line. As is most good teams and most good run games and most good quarterbacks. It is based on what is your line doing? How well do they protect for you? And the Dolphins haven't even been crushed by their O-line. It hasn't been great, but it hasn't killed them. And they're 100% a better run blocking team than they are a pass blocking. And the proof is in this key stat. They're rushing about a little over 5 yards a carry, but they're in the bottom of the league. I think they're last in the league in rush attempts. So Mike McDaniel, I know I've said this about every podcast, and maybe last week you were listening a little bit more. Could we run the ball a little more? Could we have that as more of a wrinkle? Can we stack runs to set up the pass, to draw in the linebackers, to draw in the safeties, to then get some one-on-one opportunities for your wideouts and your non-existent tight ends? And speaking of tight ends, we're going to have a Darren Waller sighting on Monday Night Football. Now, what does that mean? God only knows. Guy hasn't played football in 100 years, and you sign him, this year, and then he's hurt. But he's playing. I mean, I wouldn't get crazy excited he's going to do much, but maybe, because you're sure as hell not getting anything out of your tight ends now. Tanner Connor, I mean, look, Julian Hill's a blocker. He had a couple of nice catches. He was wide open in the Patriot game on that last fourth down. I'm not getting on them per se, but I mean, you're getting nothing out of the position. And it wouldn't be such a big deal if your top three wideouts, Hill, Waddle, Washington, you got a lot out of them. Because again, between that and the A-chain, underneaths and dump-offs, you would have probably a pretty potent offense if you gave us that run. If you gave me 120 on the ground every game with that threat and that we can get the first down. Ollie Gordon's numbers, he, on every single one of his rushes last week, he broke tackles. So it wasn't like this guy was running free. No, he's breaking tackles. Physicality. That's the type of back he is. We need more of him. Now, again, he's a rookie. So I understand to a degree, being, working it in. Guys got to learn the offense. It's a very complex offense, as we know. So I understand it to a degree. But all bets are off at this point. You're 0-3. You gotta take the kitchen sink and throw the kitchen sink at somebody, because it's the only way that you're going to have any opportunity here to save yourself, save your season, save McDaniel, which is a whole nother topic that we'll get into next. So clearly they lost the game. They did not fire Mike McDaniel. There were reports that Stephen Ross said that he's going to have some patience, which not really a surprise. I kind of said that a couple weeks ago. And he would have patience unless two things happened. One, the team quit, which they will not quit, because God knows when you have a coach, it's like having a substitute teacher. When you have a coach or a teacher who lets you get away with everything, why in the world would you quit on that guy? You wouldn't. You want that guy around forever. So that part of it is sure as hell isn't happening. The second part of it that he mentioned was if season ticket holders and fans stop going. Now, that, as this fickle fan base is, one of the worst fan bases in the NFL, and I can say that because I've been a Dolphin fan my whole life. They're a great fan base. They're not a good fan base, I should clarify, in Miami. They're a decent fan base in Miami. We show up when we want to show up in Miami. But as far as like an overall fan base across the country, very, very good fan base. But the local part of that will stop showing up. You could feel it at the home opener. I'm sure we're going to feel it tomorrow night. You can see it in prices on StubHub. So maybe in the, week 6, 7, 8, if you're sitting there at 1 and whatever or 2 and whatever, he pulls the plug. But the reality at this point is I'm kind of over it, because they're firing him. Like, look, he isn't going to be here next year. And that's really what all that matters. If you do it now or later, it doesn't matter, because he's not coming back. And you don't have a better alternative anyway right now, because you sure as hell can't sit here and say, oh, we should give it to Weaver, who's killing it on defense, because the defense is a shit show. 30 points a game for 3 straight games? Really? They can't stop a nosebleed. They cannot stop the run. Everything is wide open underneath. Tight ends are running free. And what's crazy from a defensive perspective is they don't even need to worry about deep shots in all of these games, because the offense is, we don't need to deep, even though your secondary is suspect. We're going to take everything you give us. We know we can get like 6, 7, 8 yards of pop on the ground. We'll start there. We're not going to put our defense in a position to try and, or our offense in a position to throw turnovers and throw interceptions and create turnovers for you. We're going to keep them close to the vest. Everything's underneath. Tight ends are wide open. We get 6, 7, 8 yards of pop on the ground, and bang. We have sustained drives. We keep Tua off the field, and we'll score 30 points. And we're going to outplay you on special teams, which I'm going to get into next. I screamed to fire Danny Grossman, as they should have. And the special teams has done a couple of nice things in the return game. But overall, you've had 3 games here where you've had a definitive special teams play cost you. And if you pay attention to the league and the new kickoff and everything going on, there are teams that are taking advantage of the special teams rules. And then there are teams that are like catching up. And we're always in catch-up phase. They need to solidify special teams. You cannot be running into kickers multiple times, two times out of 3 weeks. It's inexcusable. It's just as inexcusable as wasting the timeouts, as delay of games, as to the false starts, all the bullshit that you deal with as a team when you're not that talented that keep you from winning games. It has to go away. Will it? Probably not. Because as we've seen in the past, when these years start going, you get consistency and it's, hey, this is what we are. We're going to make these mistakes. Maybe it's early enough to fix it. We'll see it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about contracts. Tua this week, off of this performance, off of the horrendous performance in Indy, off of the, somewhat decent performance against the Patriots, but didn't finish. And then last week, decent performance, but again, didn't finish. He's been getting roasted in the media. And one of my worries, I have 2 worries with Tua. Number one is going to be his mental capacity and his strength mentally, because he gets some of these questions in these press conferences. And again, press conferences are press conferences. They don't, get you any yards or get you any points. I understand that. But when you're asking him questions to comment about Cam Newton, and then he's coming back with not anybody could play quarterback. Just like last year he said, the guy sitting on the couch can't comment because he doesn't know how to play quarterback. Number one, you're becoming very unlikable. And if you want to get yourself ran out of the league, become unlikable, number one. Number two, you need to be above that. And there's something to be said with today's media, and I get it. Joe Montana and Dan Marino didn't deal with, Twitter and Instagram, okay? And they dealt with paper media, radio, the one-on-one interview, and then they moved on. But the way he addresses things and answers things, it makes you think that he's mentally weak. And this is a dude who's went through a lot of stuff in his life and has bounced back and battled back where you wouldn't think he's mentally weak, but he comes across that way to me. Secondly, and even more important than that, is the injuries. He mentioned this week, injuries have taken a toll. And I have screamed for the offseason, and it's been very, very much put under the rug, and I think it's starting to take a little bit of an uptick now, the hip injury. So he ends the year last year with the hip injury. He had the major hip injury in college where he got crushed by 2 linemen. Hips are a interesting thing the way they work, different than tearing an ACL or, rolling an ankle or whatever. Your hip is your hip, and it's going to control a lot of stuff. And when we're talking about a quarterback who does not have a very strong arm and is smaller and uses his lower body strength to create arm strength, and then that lower body is altered, it hurts the arm strength and it hurts his ability to be mobile. Guy was not that mobile to begin with, but if you go back and watch his first start, 2020 in Arizona, guy's running all over the place. Now, he wasn't running, but he was running in the pocket. And again, I don't need him to be Lamar Jackson. What I do need him to be is I need him to be able to roll around the pocket and create space for himself. He did have a couple nice runs in Buffalo. He got down. And I think there's a lot of factors here. I think, one, he's trying to be ultra sensitive to staying healthy. Not mad at it. Totally understand it. He has to do that. I'm not mad. He's got a lot of people in his ear. Secondly, he's got a backup right side of his line that essentially you benched one of the guys last week. So he's got some happy feet there. And it's his blind side. I get it. But if you watch him, he's off. His accuracy is off. His arm strength is off. And I'm telling you, I think the hip and the lower body part of him is hurting him. And he also mentioned ankles, which is obviously part of the lower body, that injuries have taken a toll on him. And I think you're seeing a different Tua. Now, it's week 3, and I get it. I'm gonna probably keep saying this until all of a sudden it's week 6 and it's too late. He can come out, Monday night. He can come out next week. He can throw for 300 each night. It would not shock me in the least. But if you watch it and you just watch him and the body language and the way he's playing from his just, you can compare it to other years. Something's not right. And it's costing them. Something's not right physically, lower body. Something's not right here. And I'm not talking concussions. I'm just saying decision-making. And it's like the Dolphins are waiting for things to come to them as opposed to them taking it to the other team. And that's your recipe to lose. It's always going to be your recipe to lose. And that leads you, let's go a little deeper here. I mentioned we're going to talk quickly on contracts. His contract and Zach Sealer's contract. Now, hindsight's always 20/20. If we go back 2 years onto his contract where you could have had him for a 5th-year option, if right now, and I'm not sitting here saying he can't still be a good quarterback, I'm not saying get rid of him, I'm not saying I don't like him, but what I'm saying is as you're looking at this situation, 2025, where we know where it's headed, we know this is probably rolling to a 6-win season only because they'll have enough talent and they're going to probably win a couple of games in a row to get us excited. It's probably going to be Jets-Panthers. Let's face facts. It's what the Dolphins do. And they're going to get our hope up at 2-3 and then get their asses kicked by the Chargers. That's what's going to happen. You can take it to the bank. And I just ruined my spoiler. When you think about the situation they're in where you know McDaniel's going to be gone, barring a miracle, and you now have Tua this year, major cap hit, next year, major cap hit. Would you have signed him to the big deal last year? You wouldn't have. What you would have done, and this is where when you look at why they are what they are, why they haven't won a playoff game in 25 years, why they have been a, stuck in the middle, mediocre team for so long, where they do just enough to think they're good, and they had that ceiling of almost winning the division. If you look at that, and then you look at the decisions they make financially, you're like, well, they spend money, but they spend stupid money. Because if you had the foresight and the balls to sign him on the 5th-year option instead of the big contract, and then he had concussions last year, instead of him being a $45 million quarterback right now, with $70-something million cap hit this year. It's like a $50-something million cap hit next year. It's to the point like he'll be on the team unless you're going to rip a Band-Aid off like the Broncos did with Russell Wilson, which, to their credit, it worked out very well for them. But find me the amount of teams that's going to work out for. Ones that draft well, which you better hit on almost every pick, and God knows we don't. We hit on some. Tua would be sitting here right now on a 1 or 2 year deal in the 25 million range as opposed to 45, and you'd have $20 million other dollars to use on the rest of your team that needs it. Now, that's a cold, callous way to look at it, but the reality is, one, it's a league problem because every other quarterback, even if they're not better than the last guy, they think that they need to make more money than the last guy by like $1, which is asinine. This should be a pay-for-performance league. Because we be having a completely different conversation right now in the realm of everything. And if you had this bad coach situation and season, you could turn it around fast next year. And again, I understand good quarterbacks don't grow on trees. I get it. I get if you say, get rid of Tua, and I'm not saying get rid of Tua, that who else are you getting? Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, some 7th-round pick. I mean, God, if we have to bench him, which people are talking about, which I think is just absurd, who are we learning about? Zach Wilson and Quinn Ewers? Like, come on. If you think they're the future, you're lost. They're not. Zach Wilson is garbage, and another dumb decision by Mike McDaniel. And a Chris Greer, I want to listen to my coach special on a guy who's dead. But that's the situation you're in from a money perspective. And let's face facts. Tua is Ryan Tannehill. Now, they're completely opposite when it comes to how they play, their skill sets. One has great pocket presence in Tua. One has terrible pocket presence in Tannehill. One has a stronger arm, Tannehill. One has a weaker arm, Tua. One is more inaccurate, Tannehill. One is more accurate, Tua. Completely different quarterbacks, completely the same situation. You're 6 years in the second contract, and you're in no man's land, and you don't know which way is up. Tannehill did not have the quote-unquote injury history, even though he had, obviously, the knee injury. But he was pretty much an Iron Man up until that. And then it was just one of those things. He hurt it the one time, then he re-aggravated it. It's definitely different than concussions, definitely different from hip. But when I say you're in the same situation, you are, because you're in year 6 and you don't know where you're going. And you're much more towards, we're looking for Tua's replacement than we are he's the answer. Because Lord knows when you get a new coach next year, Tua will be here because you're not going to take that cap hit. Of course, unless, like I said, you want to go down the Russell Wilson Broncos route, which is not smart. But that guy is going to incumbent Tua. Now, he'll probably ride the bench, but you're going to get a coach, and Lord help me, you better, that is going to be a completely different offensive mind than Mike McDaniel. And again, nobody was crying about Mike McDaniel's offense in 2023, myself included. But here's the difference. You had a good run game, and you had a dynamic offense, and you also beat bad teams and lost to good teams and didn't, come through in the clutch. So let's also take that part of it with a grain of salt. But the bottom line is, if you're Steve Ross and you know you're going to get a next coach, that next coach is going to be the most hard-nosed coach for physical smash-mouth football that we've ever seen. And if you don't do that, you are completely blind. And I'm going to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that although I think he's blind at times, I don't think he's that blind to understand that this finesse bullshit is only going to get you so far. And the next guy better run smash mouth football. And the moves in your offseason dictated that. I said it last week. The moves you made were not McDaniel moves. What they were Chris Greer. I'll give him some credit for finally, having some gumption to actually do some things that maybe he thinks make more sense and building more of a physical team. And now you're just dealing with some of the growing pains, with like your D lineman that you drafted, Savanaya that you drafted on the O-line. You're dealing with the growing pains of these guys are young. They've been in the league for 3 weeks. You got to give it some time. But they went and built the trenches or to the best of their ability in one offseason. You're not going to do it in one offseason. And then second side on contracts is the Zach Sealer deal. Same thing. Now, again, this is a league problem. You signed him to a good deal. He outperformed his contract. He's a good player. But here's where they're always paying guys too much too soon for too little in the wrong situation. His numbers are down. Why are his numbers down? Now, again, he's a good player. Last year he had Calais Campbell. The year before he had Christian Wilkins. Now he's babysitting Kenneth Grant, Biggers, Phillips. He's babysitting these guys. his numbers are down and you paid him. So now two of the top people you paid are not performing. Now, again, it's week 3. I get it. And he can come out tomorrow and have an amazing game. I get it. But you didn't have to make that move. Was he holding out? And if he held out, like, the thing that I don't understand with the league and guys holding out, how many guys actually do? Oh, because they don't come to training camp? There's a handful that you can think about, and Le'Veon Bell comes to mind from years ago, who actually held out and then kicked himself for it because it was stupid and he lost money. And I think it was the Jets or the Steelers, whoever it was. They basically said, all right, well, whatever. We'll figure it out. Like, where are these guys? Your lifespan in the NFL is short. Like, you can't be giving up game checks. And guess what? Even if Zach Sealer, and I hate to use Zach Sealer because Zach Sealer is a good dude and a good prominent player on this team. If you did, what difference would it make? You could be 0-3 with him or you could be 0-3 without him. And I maybe could have had more money to use elsewhere. Just saying. Now, again, his contract and Tua are completely different things, quarterback, the whole deal. I'm just giving you the overall view of where I think a good organization makes money moves and where a bad organization makes money moves. And God knows right now we are a bad organization. That being said, and I swear I try to be positive on these podcasts. I promise. It's very hard at 0-3. But here's where we are. Steve Gio's Week 4 Miami Dolphin pick in the league where they play for pay. Dolphins, Jets, Monday Night Football, Hard Rock Stadium. 0-3 versus 0-3. Somebody has to get a win. Will it be the Dolphins trying to save McDaniel's job? Will it be the Jets getting their first win for Aaron Glenn and his new regime? My prediction. We have the Dolphins favored by 2.5. I'm now 0-3 on my picks, and I think if I pick the Dolphins this week, I need to never pick them again because God knows I'm going to be 0-4, and that's just going to be dreadful. But over-under also 44.5. My view, I think the Dolphins are going to come out, win this game 30-17. I think they will have a close game, kind of back and forth, and then I think they will pull away, and I actually think they're going to get a complete game, rushing Tua, big play from Tyreek, create a couple turnovers. You're going to get Justin Fields coming back off of a concussion. The Jets have a very beat-up defense. I think you're going to do some things in this game because you're absolutely desperate, and I do think the Dolphins do have more talent on their team than the Jets do, and I think Hard Rock Stadium, night game, I do think we're going to bring the energy and enthusiasm. We got the first ever Black Rivalries uniform for Monday Night Football, so that's my prediction. I think Dolphins 30, Jets 17, Jets, suck. Let's go Dolphins. We'll see you at the Rock for Monday Night Football. And then next week in Carolina, let's go Fins.